Cross-examinations, and closing statements. On our left, we have Kevin Hamrick, former Director of Debate at Northwestern. To his left, we have Josh Clark, Final Four debate semifinalist from 2004 College National Championships. To our right, we have Sam Meacham, future historian. And to his left, Aiden Barton, the most decorated high school debater of all time. We will begin with Mr. Hamrick.
All right, good morning. Can everybody hear? Is the mic working all right? You guys ready? In the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States promised to provide for the defense of Ukraine's territorial integrity in exchange for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons. Russia has never been happy with this losing of Ukraine, and Trump patron Vladimir Putin has made no secret of his disdain of an independent Ukraine. In 2014, Russia went so far to annex Ukrainian territory of Crimea and has since funded pro-Russian paramilitaries in eastern Ukraine seeking to destabilize the Ukrainian government. There is an active war ongoing. People are dying. In response, the U.S. Congress overwhelmingly approved $400 million in security assistance to Ukraine. The aid is an existential question for the sovereign nation and U.S. strategic ally Ukraine. This is the context in which President Trump and his aides, both inside and outside of official channels, extorted the president of Ukraine into promising a predicate-less investigation into his most prominent challenger to his 2020 election. These events are not in dispute, even by the Trump administration itself. I'm trying not to cough. The White House added a transcript of a July 25th phone call, quotes Trump replying to Ukrainian requests for acquiring U.S.-made Javelin missiles as, "I would like you to do us a favor, though." Almost daily, testimony of Trump administration officials and career public servants confirm that U.S. foreign policy was corrupted in service of Trump's personal political ambitions. All of this, of course, is illegal and abuse of office. The Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, passed in the aftermath of America's last criminal presidency, expressly prohibits presidential leveraging of congressional appropriated funds for political ends.
You open for cross-examination?
Yes.
So let's say that Obama, when negotiating the Iran deal and whether to put sanctions on Iran, looked at polls showing that it was popular and then decided to go ahead with it solely based off his political interest to do so. Is that impeachable?
If Obama, repeat the question.
So if Obama decided to put sanctions on Iran for the nuclear deal, that's extortion because it's a threat, only based off his sole political interest. Is that impeachable?
No, it's not extortion.
Why not?
The conduct of U.S. The president has the power to conduct U.S. foreign policy. It's to what ends the foreign policy is put.
Exactly. Okay, so you haven't made an argument yet that Trump's his ends were bad. So could you give me a reason that investigating a dominant political figure is a bad thing?
The question is not the investigation of an opponent. It is the question of whether or not you extorted certain actions
extortion is just a
threat. In pursuit of your own political ambitions, which is different from pursuing American foreign policy in pursuit of U.S. national interests.
But the problem is that the Iran deal helped Obama's political interests, and the U.S. Code defines extortion just as, quote, receiving a thing of value under informing a threat. The threat was sanctions for the Iran deal.
Yes, the thing of value that the president was seeking was political benefit to be reelected in 2020. How does that not apply to the Iran
deal example, too? It helped Obama in the election.
Because the Iran deal was in pursuit of American interest of containing Iranian nuclear ambitions, not in pursuit of President Obama's re-election.
It was a hypothetical example. We started it with the premise that Obama did it off political gains.
No, it was started in the premise, the Iran deal was started with the premise of containing Iranian nuclear ambitions in order to protect U.S. national security.
Yeah, but Obviously, Obama's, whatever his intentions are unfalsifiable and unverifiable. In this hypothetical example, if we...
No. There is U.S. policy that says it is in U.S. national interest to contain Iranian nuclear ambitions.
Okay.
The same U.S. policy is for the U.S. to defend Ukraine against Russian aggression.
Good. Our framers had the debate about whether or not Trump's actions were impeachable, and they had it 250 years ago. They concluded, without a doubt, that maladministration does not rise to the level to remove the president. You may think that Trump committed a grave political sin by trying to secure a QPQ from Ukraine's president, but the question you must answer to impeach the president and to remove the president is whether or not he violated the text of the U.S. Constitution. President Trump is our nation's chief law enforcement officer and our chief diplomat. Thus, he can pursue any international objective he so chooses. Presidents often prioritize these objectives based on their own political self-interest, as any politician would. But as long as there is some case that he is pursuing the diplomatic interests of the United States, we can brush aside any allegation that there was criminal conduct. In this case, investigating Ukrainian corruption, like the Iran deal, is a valid, vital diplomatic interest. The reason Biden was in Ukraine in 2016 was to talk with the government about Obama's anti-corruption campaign. Even bracketing the issue of Ukraine, holding politicians like Biden accountable for potential corrupt activities in an election year is of valid interest. Therefore, the investigation served both foreign and domestic goals of the country, not just of President Trump. Their specific charges, in addition, are ridiculous. This is not abuse of power. Obviously, Trump had a political interest in investigating Biden, but this debate is not about motives, but actions. Any other frame would result in unverifiable accusations of thought crimes, which is not a ground under the law to remove a president. The U.S. conducts quid pro quos with countries every day. Sanctions on North Korea or Iran indicate that it is not a valid ground for impeachment. I stand open for cross-examination.
Is your contention that the president can conduct any action in terms of American foreign policy as long as he did not intend to break the law?
Well, our argument is that intentions are not the question here.
What is the question then?
The question is whether or not the Ukrainian corruption investigation was of diplomatic interest to the United States. If it is true that this was of a diplomatic interest, then Trump had every right to use a quid pro quo to secure Ukrainian cooperation on this investigation.
Can the United States could Trump threaten to use nuclear weapons against China unless it conducted an investigation into Joe Biden?
Well, if he would prove that that investigation into Joe Biden was of valid diplomatic interest, which we have done in the context of Ukraine, then coercion is allowed under any definition of what the U.S. does foreign policy-wise on a daily basis.
Can the United States threaten to invade the United Kingdom unless it conducted an investigation into Hillary Clinton?
Again, if they have proof, or if they have an argument that Hillary Clinton investigation would be valid diplomatic interest, then yes. I don't understand.
The United States threatened to remove U.S. troops from NATO unless the NATO countries collectively contributed $100 million apiece into Trump's personal bank account.
Mr. Armagresson, the same question here. That is an egregious example. There's no valid diplomatic interest of contributing money into Trump's campaign account.
But this, it's
not the point.
Is that Trump can use any means of U.S. foreign
No, it's not.
To benefit his personal interest?
It's not the personal interest. There's obviously no diplomatic interest in contributing millions into Trump, but investigations in Ukraine are valid.
I'll move on. Last question. Is there any example of Trump using the powers of office to investigate corruption for anyone except Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden?
I'm not sure that's a relevant question to the issue.
All right. So continuing on with our plea for impeachment, we'll take up Aiden's question from cross-examination. What laws have been violated? Isn't extortion any kind of interaction with foreign policy? Aiden challenged us, and guess what? We'll take the Pepsi challenge. Article 2, Section 4 of our Constitution delineates what offenses warrant the removal of a president. The president shall be removed from office for impeachment for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. We'd like to isolate 3. First, Trump's first abuse of trust and our founders feared most was inviting a foreign power to interfere with our democracy. This presupposes the question that Aiden asks about extortion or a quid pro quo would be a nicer way to say it. It doesn't need it. If you solicit that help for the purposes of political gain, which he says intent doesn't matter, it's the action that matters. Investigation into Biden himself is that very action. Number 2, he's also guilty of a second impeachable offense, bribery. The evidence we need to prove Trump partook in the quid pro quo, the edited summary of the phone call released by his own White House, meanwhile a very redacted version where there are 7 or 6 other phone calls still being withheld. Third, Trump has done everything he can to cover up these 2 high crimes, which brings us to his third offense, obstruction of justice, which clearly falls under the category of an impeachable offense by refusing to cooperate under most auspices of the trial. Now, Aiden posed a very interesting question in the cross-ex of the 1NC, and that is, what if Obama would have benefited from the Trump deal? The answer to this question is that our foreign policy goals were aligned with containing nuclear emboldenment. And the sophistry that Aiden is engaged in by saying that extortion doesn't matter at all because everything we do is extortion would literally destroy the democratic values that we align as Americans and allow us to ship our country to Putin, and that's not what we want.
Are you open? Yeah. Let's imagine that House Democrats asked the Ukrainians to give a transcript of a call to the investigation. Would that qualify as use of their congressional office for personal gain and thus against the Constitution? It's not on. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. If the House Democrats asked for a call transcript from Ukraine, would that qualify as an impeachable offense for the Congress?
More sophistry.
Can you answer the question, please?
Yes, the reality is that the reality of the situation is not that. What they asked for was to help to bag Biden. Okay? This is not a question of national interest.
What's the distinction?
This is not Sam. If President Trump was concerned about corruption, don't you think he'd be concerned about the 27 people around him who got arrested during the Mueller report, or the 2 Ukrainian officials who have now, nationals who were directly supporting his campaign?
Well, this
who
also
recently
seems like
been arrested?
whataboutism and sophistry. But can you answer my question?
Yeah, really?
If Congress
Is he
asked for
concerned
this-
about corruption?
In this case, he is.
In this case, he is. We've proven that. But can you please answer the question? Would Congress have violated the Constitution by colluding with Ukraine for political interest in the
answer
inquiry?
to this question is clear. While we have no burden to defend Biden, what we do have a burden to say is Biden had the interest of cleaning up the democracy in Ukraine from going into a further corruption.
Exactly. He was doing that under
what Trump is
administration priorities.
What Trump is incentivizing is the side of more corruption in Ukraine.
You still have not answered my question. Would that be illegal if Congress asked for a transcript of the Trump phone call from Ukrainians, which they have done?
Engaging a slippery slope to make extortion meaningless in our Constitution would literally be the end of America. That's not answering our question.
Remember Mr. Clark's answer to Iran example. He said that it was, quote, in the interest of our foreign policy. But where was their answer to Meacham's 30 seconds on why it's helpful to investigate Biden? None of that goes answered. The closest Mr. Clark gets is that, well, Trump doesn't care about corruption, so he's obviously not authentic here. But part of a whole argument is that we can never know somebody's genuine motives. It's unverifiable, it's unfalsifiable, and even then, it's not illegal for the president to act in political interests. Every single politician acts in their political interests. The reason that he couldn't answer the question in cross-examination is because it happens literally every day. In 2018, in May, Senate Democrats requested Ukrainian help in the Manafort investigation. What? They're doing that for their political interest. Get them out of office? Obviously not. It's foreign interference in a US election, but that happens every day and is done for political interests. We only need to win that it could be construed somewhat for diplomatic interests. At least there's some risk that it could have helped the United States. And they aren't disputing that at all. Now, they say it's bribery. Well, it's not really bribery under any meaningful interpretation of the statute, insofar as we use QPQs every day that have some effect of helping the political gain. The question that they are raising is that there's some arbitrary spectrum, and I agree, it does feel worse. This Biden thing feels worse than maybe the Obama-Iran deal. But the question is one of objectivity and standards. They both have an effect of helping a political figure. The degree of proximity to the election might be closer with the Biden deal, but it's the same logic and principle. Judges don't interpret statutes based off their gut feeling. They do it off logical principles. And the logical principle undergoing both of these examples is political gain, which happens every day, which is far worse for our democracy than following specific laws like bribery or perjury.
Hello? So Aiden, is the primary goal of something important or just the potential for any possible benefit down the road?
So the problem is that we can really never know the primary goal. And we think that politicians...
Okay. So if you can't know the primary goal, then your argument is that that extortion should be legal.
No, it's when it violates specific
Okay,
statutes.
if it shouldn't be legal, then how can you enforce
based off the action
extortion?
itself, not the
Okay,
intention.
so-
That's what judges do too.
But it's predicated on it being of personal interest. So extortion
No.
by definition, has to be for
That's not
political
true. So
interest.
the example that...
Can you give me one example
Yeah.
of extortion that could exist if we engage in your type of
The
dangerous
one Mr.
sophistry?
Hamrick gave where he was like giving money to Trump's campaign for NATO contributions, obviously there's no diplomatic interest there. But we've proven there's some diplomatic interest. What diplomatic interest do contribution campaigns
okay,
have?
Aiden, I mean, maybe they just needed to be a different donation for their taxes, right? For tax
for Trump
purposes. They could be their
personally?
primary because you can't prove what that
For Trump
is.
personally?
Yeah, I mean, he
How is
doesn't
that,
pay
how is that a
taxes, so I don't
diplomatic
know.
interest?
If we knew what his taxes were, maybe we would have an answer to that question. Okay, so can you speak to, since you're trying to, your goal is to give a seed of a doubt that Trump had some type of genuine interest in this.
I mean, at this point, it's not even a seed of the doubt, because I think it's pretty reasonable to say corruption is important. It's important to know whether there was something rotten in the state of Ukraine, which is pretty clear.
So it is illegal to act, for the president to act for his own personal interests
solely
by
for,
soliciting.
That's the key part of this debate, solely for his own political interest. You need to win it's exclusive, but every single politician acts for their own political interest. That's what we've been saying the whole time.
if I can prove that Rudy Giuliani is on record as of saying that it was in his only personal interest.
The whole point is that it's not intentions, it's the actions. We've proven this helped the United States, and you haven't disputed that.
Aiden, I have that evidence.
All right. Coughing fit seems to have passed. My apologies. A few things to point out that Aiden and Sam have not addressed. The first of which is that the act itself is illegal. The Congressional Budget and Empowerment Control Act of 1974 does not give the president the leeway to leverage aid. In fact, it makes it illegal for the president to do so in pursuit of political ends, which even their argument concedes. Second, as my partner, Coach Clark, said, that the invitation of foreign actors and foreign interference in U.S. elections is an impeachable offense, named by the founders in the Federalist Papers.
All ends are political, as Aiden previously said. I'll address one more of their arguments about how soliciting help in a vacuum might be a bad thing. Let's think of a less charged example than the evil Putin and the evil Russia collaborating with the evil Trump. Imagine if Obama was talking with a friend in the British Parliament about his election and asked benignly, "How do you think I could best win?" Would that be collusion? Would that be extortion? Obviously not, which proves how arbitrary their frame is.
We've presented 3 reasons for impeachment. Only 2 have been responded to. The obstruction and refusal to participate and the putting of the transcript on another server violates the Constitution in and of itself. Beyond that, I urge you, both as judges and students, to believe that extortion should be important because it is the fight for rule of law and the soul of our country. I'll end with the words of a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian. As the debate over impeachment and removal unfolds, the nation's immediate and long-term future depends on whether Americans will be guided by reason rather than passion, fact rather than faith, evidence rather than tribe. Please, extortion for the purpose of political gain, Rudy Giuliani tweeted that it was true, means that we must elect to impeach and remove the president. Thank you.
Obviously, investigating Biden has some political import. Our whole argument is that every action has political import. A thesis claim not answered by them. The question is, can it be construed for some valid diplomatic interest? Another thing they are not disputing. Now, obstruction of justice is a joke. Trump has turned over tapes. There's a lawsuit over whether the subpoenas are legal right now, so it's actually being debated, and he's invoked executive privilege. What laws were broken? If the only claim is for political ends, we've proved that's inevitable, but it's far, far worse to try to convict president when they have to kind of negotiate from an interest of their political standing. Their interpretation would result in impeaching every single president, which is far, far worse for our democracy.
We have a 5-judge panel of Mr. Yorko, Mr. Quinn, Dr. Leck, Mr. Callums, and Mr. Pierce, who will give us a verdict here momentarily. There are 5 votes. The first vote is for the teachers. The second vote is for the students. The third vote is for the teachers. The fourth vote is for the students. And the fifth vote is for the teachers.